My name is Val Amsden, and I'm your host of This Side of the Grass. Throughout my experience with the death of very close loved ones, I learned that not many people are prepared for the inevitable. Someday we will all die. On this podcast, I hope to normalize these conversations about dying, not only so we can be prepared, but more importantly, so that we can truly live every single day with purpose and intention that we are blessed to be here on this side of the grass. Welcome to today's episode of This Side of the Grass. I'm your host, Val Amsden. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you being here. Whether you're somebody who knows me, who's here to support me, whether you were forwarded this episode, maybe it applies to you right now in something that you're going through, or maybe you came across it just through a random Google search or something based on the topic. I just want to let you know I appreciate you being here. This is definitely a journey of the heart, and I hate the word journey, but it's an experience of the heart as I talk through a lot of things that I've gone through in trying to relate them to you and hopefully putting something out there that you are going to resonate with, learn from, be informed by, and hopefully inspired to act from as well. I posted a picture of myself on social media about a week ago. It wasn't even an actual post. It was just in one of my stories showing a picture of me in the podcast studio. Not a lot of detail yet, but I had just posted the picture saying big things are coming. And that picture and that post really resonated with more people than I expected. And the comments were super positive. And as I talked to friends, as I talked to family, as I got some text messages, it really reminded me that everyone has his or her own experience when it comes to losing people, when it comes to loss, when it comes to death and dying, and even their own experiences either preparing or not preparing for what is to come. It's amazing how we can get kicked off center by something like an unexpected loss or even an unexpected diagnosis. And I don't pretend to have all the answers, and I don't pretend to be a subject matter expert on a lot of these things that we're going to talk about, but through my experiences in trying to have these conversations, I really hope that it resonates with you or that you can share it with someone. And in that light, as I was having these conversations, comparison came to mind. This isn't just to do with death and dying and losing people and grief, but just in general in life, we compare ourselves to others all the time, whether intentionally or not. And I think social media is a big part of that, as we see everyone else's highlight reels and everyone else's accomplishments and trips and new jobs and new pets or babies or weddings. It's hard not to compare ourselves. That's just what we do. Keeping up with the Joneses is a term that's been around for my entire life. I don't know how old that is. I know how old I am. Don't know how old the phrase is. But I think that comparison, when it comes to losing a loved one, is also something that happens that we don't really acknowledge. I sat through a handful of grief group sessions on BetterHelp shortly after my brother passed away. A few of them had to do with grief, and one was sibling loss specifically. And two big things that were enlightening to me through those sessions, one of them is how much we do compare to someone else in thinking, well, I'm further ahead on my journey, or I'm more sad than they are, or why am I more sad? Why am I less sad? Why am I crying more? Why am I crying less? So as we went through this grief session specifically, the comparison was there unintentionally, as I was reflecting on my path through something that is so personal. So one of the things that I'd love to share with you today, based on just my experience, is how absolutely personal it is when you lose somebody and how lonely it makes you feel because of that. Even if you are grieving the same person, mourning the same life, you and someone else have a totally different experience. I have another brother who's younger than I am, and he and I talk so much more now since our older brother passed away. And we try not to compare to one another, but let our stories be what they are, our experiences be what they are, our feelings be what they are. As we travel through the grief experience, it's like we're on this road. And the road can be as wide or as narrow as you want to picture it, but you're on this road. And on this road, you're not walking, but you're in this little car. You're in this little car and you've got your steering wheel. And in my mind, it's a little bubble. You're driving in this bubble because you can see everywhere. There's no blind spots. There's glass all around you, windows all around you. You can see to your left. You can see in front of you. You can see to your right. Everything is around you, but you are by yourself in this little vehicle or whatever it is. In my mind, that's what it looks like, a tiny little bubble. But on this road are a ton of other little bubbles, and in those bubbles are people. So even if we're on the same road as someone else, their vantage points are going to be so much different than ours, and that's okay. Comparison is a natural thing. Acknowledge it, understand it, but then try to realize that whatever you are feeling, whatever you are experiencing, however much you're crying or not crying, talking or not talking about it, it's okay. That's your experience. And no one else's is better or worse. I attended a funeral yesterday, and it was for my great uncle. So my grandfather, who passed away even before my mom, this was her dad. He was one of 11 siblings. And my great uncle that passed away was the last of the 11. It was incredible to see the number of people in the church to celebrate this life. But the feeling of the funeral, because my great uncle was 84, compared to the feeling, there's the word compared, to the feeling that I remember at my brother's funeral, who was 44, was just so different. And I tried to reflect as I was sitting in the pew, listening to this crazy ritual. We've already talked about funerals and how it's something that's so necessary for us to be able to process and share our grief with others and show our support for the family. As we go through this ritual of maybe it's songs, maybe it's Bible verses. In this case, it was a Catholic Mass, so it included communion. The feeling was so much more joyful. The feeling was so much more uplifting because of the perception that the person that we lost lived such a full life. He made it to 84. He was able to experience all of these things with his children and his grandchildren. He was a lover of the Minnesota Vikings and the Minnesota Twins and scratch-off tickets and the stories that were told. It was easy to laugh at some of these stories that were being told. But I kept thinking about the comparison of how many people, the length of the service, the tone of the service, just all of these things that were decided by his family for his service, thinking through how we made the decisions of what we were doing at Dan's service, my brother, or at my mom's service 13 years ago. The tone was so different. But that's okay. That's okay. Comparison is normal. Comparison is normal. So the second thing I had shared, I was in these grief groups and I learned two things. The second aha moment for me was as we talked about the 5 stages of grief. And the counselor, the moderator of this group, and there was only 5 or 6 of us, if I'm recalling correctly, he was walking us through the stages of grief and the feelings that we go through as we go from one stage to the next. And as you very well know, if you've been through it, there is no linear path through any stages of grief. It's like up and down and back and around and backwards, and you're hitting them all, and you're angry, and then you're going through denial, and then you're angry again. And really, it's not a linear path at all. But as part of this, he shared with us a picture. I don't honestly remember what the picture was supposed to be of. In my mind, it was either a ball of yarn or a brain, because it was some kind of circle. And in the circle were all of these winding, almost looked like a maze. And within this circle and this maze inside of it were just words. And the words were all feelings. And it was the anger and the denial and some of those feelings that you automatically associate with grief, whether you've gone through it or not. It's the things you see in the movies, right? The sadness and the despair and the confusion and asking why. But the one that I remember sticking out at me and jumping out at me and going, I don't understand why this is here, was jealousy. And I thought that was just such an odd word to have amongst the grief. But as I've gone through the last year since I saw that, and as I've reflected back, even on the 13 years since losing my mom, and the years before that, losing grandparents, that comparison is what leads to the jealousy. It's that comparison of not only the experience through the funeral process potentially, but as your life continues and as you continue to go through on that road in your little bubble, looking all around, and we're comparing ourselves as we move forward or try to move forward, everyone is going to have a different experience. And as we compare, we might feel those feelings of jealousy. That person has moved on already. Why haven't I? That person over there still has their mom. That's not fair. They're upset about planning for a holiday. Well, I would love to have the opportunity to fight over holiday plans with my mom. Or any number of other experiences as we go down that path. So my bottom line, as I've been reflecting on comparison, especially having had the timeliness of going to this funeral yesterday and seeing relatives I haven't seen in a long, long time, give yourself the grace and the space and the permission to realize that it's a real thing. It's just something we're going to do as human beings. Be aware of it and try to let it go. Your journey is your journey. Your little pod, your little bubble that you're on, it's not any better or any worse than anyone else. You're on that road. You're going in the same direction. And as long as you are moving forward in the way that you need to go, you're going to be just fine. Thanks for joining me today.